Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the large number, an increasing number of activist district attorneys in the United States, public prosecutors, and legal aid lawyers and those sort of people. How many of them are openly making public statements to the effect that the justice system is completely illegitimate. It's constructed by white men. The reasons for arresting people, the laws, the criminal statutes, the penalties are all illegitimate. They're just constructed by evil white supremacists, if not Hitler personally. And so these people are, as they see it, required, they're duty bound. It is an obligation for them to, in effect, subvert and overturn this system because none of it is legitimate. Why is it not legitimate? Well, that's an area that they're less specific on, but they then switch to outcomes and say, well, more black people get arrested, more black people get sent to prison, more black people reoffend and get sent back to prison and so on. So that shows that the system is racist and unequal and therefore illegitimate on that basis. So it's a very ideological sort of Marxist take on things, really. If the outcome is unequal, then the whole thing is illegitimate and must be turned on its head and turned around. So we're looking at some quite astonishing numbers here in some areas of the United States. Over 97.3% of those arrested are not imprisoned or not charged at all or take plea deals. Now, it doesn't mean they're just getting off necessarily, but the sort of restrictions that are placed upon them that would work if you were dealing with a middle-class white guy with a job and a house and a family, they're very sensitive to sort of restrictions and anything that may sort of besmirch their good name. Those sort of restrictions and don't really apply. They don't work with other people. People that are sort of don't care if they die in the next 5 minutes, then they're much less susceptible to those sort of subtle, discreet, shaming, if you like, type controls. So anyway, it doesn't mean they all get off scot-free necessarily. Maybe they get ankle bracelets. Maybe they get curfews. Maybe it's some sort of equivalent to house arrest, or maybe they've got to visit their local police station once a day or twice a day to make sure they haven't run off, or maybe there are other restrictions on them. Maybe they pay a fine, maybe community service, or they're ordered to do community service. Now, whether they do or don't do this, if you're a street vagrant, then the threat of imprisonment over not doing your community service, so there are certain limits. Now, when you've got people that are penniless in effect and they have nothing you can take, you can't shame and humiliate them. So they'll worry about getting fired from their jobs. They don't have a job, and the job that they do have isn't the sort of one that will be susceptible to, maybe it's just casual labouring on a building site. The people on the building site don't give a shit if someone's got some arrest record. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant. They don't care about it. If someone's got a nice white collar job in an air conditioned office downtown, then they are susceptible to those sorts of things. So the sorts of controls that these say they're often black or gay, lesbian, or Jewish, and they're social justice type activist people. They say, well, white guys get off with some community service. So why can't the black guy, the black criminal's got arrested? Why can't he have the same? I mean, if the white guy gets it, why can't he have it? So, and I do understand that, by the way. It's just, if it's a simplistic, childlike observation of the world, then sure, it does appear to be different and potentially unjust. But just wait a minute, the the community service thing will scare the pants off the respectable middle class white guy. And again, his good name and all that sort of stuff. He's got people depending on him, mortgages to pay and car payments to make, school fees to pay, got all that sort of stuff. So he can't afford disruption and restriction, just can't do it. His whole life falls to pieces and all of its meaning. But again, to the black guy with no job or a casual labourer owns nothing, that's different. The sort of those sort of middle class type controls don't work with someone. They have no. And what happens if they reoffence? Okay, so they don't turn up for community service, or they turn up and are deliberately disruptive and screw it all up. What are you going to do? You drag them back into court, and then what do you do? Then what do you do to them? So there's a certain tier of justice that only works when you can threaten people with taking away what they have and taking away their future. That's those threats really do strike home in a big way. But when you're trying to threaten somebody, as in the justice system, so if you don't behave properly, we're going to do this to you. What do you do? What? So this is the bifurcation and how looking at different outcomes or different penalties. That they can only apply to certain people under certain circumstances and conditions. So now, does imprisonment work for the black criminals? Well, maybe in some cases, often not. I would suspect it would further criminalise them. So what's the solution? Now, to say that, well, the whole system's illegitimate because the outcomes are different, and then to put activists into these roles, say, well, we just won't prosecute these people. Doesn't matter what they do, we'll just put them back on the street, and we'll just tell them they got to turn up for community service. Now, just from an administrative point of view, if someone's told that they have to report to the local police station twice a day, that's part of their sort of being released back on the street, a parole type sort of condition. If they don't do it, then and they have no fixed address, what do you do exactly? How do you find them? That's a lot of police resources to chase them down wherever they may be. Can the police really be bothered with that? Will that be considered a priority? A lot of the police chiefs and senior police officers are also activists, so their emphasis, don't worry about that. Go and chase those evil white people for doing mean tweets or something, as you see in Britain and elsewhere. So the whole concept of what is justice, what is punishment, what should crimes be, how should they be defined, and how do we create equal outcomes? For example, in one county, which is I think it's got like a 60% black population, this county or district, and 97 point something percent of the cases, those arrested are let go, or some bullshit plea deal, such as they cop to doing 10 hours of community service, that sort of thing. So they scream from the rooftops here, or tacitly claim, well, look, we've introduced equality here because now the number of white people getting prosecuted is equal to the number of black people getting prosecuted. Wow, we now have equity, we now have equality. But they're achieving that by simply not prosecuting black people and aggressively prosecuting white people for what would be considered misdemeanors. Now, this is all done for the politicized social justice optics of saying, look, see, we've achieved equality in the arrest, the prosecution rate, but in fact, it's nothing of the sort. It's a conjuring act rather than an actual application of the law. Now, we need to go back a little bit further and have a deeper dive into the way law is being taught at most universities, not only in the US but also here in Australia and Britain and Canada and so on. Is that the law is meant to be now is seen as a restorative, as in restoring justice to the oppressed and to provide restitution for the oppressed and those who have unequal social power. And again, this is an ideological construct, who has or doesn't have social power or white privileges. It's sometimes another way of expressing it. If the social power in between different groups, for example, the black and white or whatever is deemed to be unequal, then there has to be, in terms of the social justice hustlers and grifters, there has to be some sort of restorative mechanisms in play. And this is that they've infected the entire Western legal establishment with this attitude. So that if you're a straight white male, you run at 1,000,000 miles an hour from any courtroom you can, because the chances are you're going to be fleeced, and they'll just reverse the burden of proof. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But lawyers now representing straight white males tell their certainly, and this is widespread now, tell their clients, the straight white male, do not come into court with a sharp-looking suit and shiny black shoes and a crisp white shirt and a necktie. Do not, just you've just been to the hairdressers and clean shaven. And so do not turn up looking wealthy and respectable. Do not do it, because the first thing that the activist judge is going to say, well, he's got plenty we can take, or he doesn't need any further white supremacy benefits and privileges. So I'll just rule against him regardless of the facts or the evidence. And so this sort of thing. And I watched a case where there's two white people suing each other, or one white guy suing another white guy over some bullshit dispute over a fence boundary or some crap like that. Should never have got to court. But so the guy, one guy turns up, the hustler, the troublemaker, as I see it. One guy turns up in a clothes with holes in them, and he looks like he just got out of bed, and he's unshaven, and he speaks like he's slightly moronic and so on. But the other guy that must have been on his way to work or something, he turns up in this sharp suit and the haircut and looking like, and so the judge turns to the guy in the sharp suit in the case and says, well, you've clearly got plenty of money. What's your problem? Why don't you just pay? Why don't you just pay the feel on the guy that won? And that turns out the guy with the who's looking disheveled and badly dressed, he's just recently inherited a large estate from a dead relative, so he's actually the wealthier of the two, but the judge makes a decision purely on the basis who looks the better off. You're well spoken and well dressed, so I'll rule against you. And this attitude of restorative justice and restitution and producing equal outcomes, this sort of thing, this infects the entire judiciary. I was at a function some time ago where the chief justice of a superior court was there, and I was chatting to him and his pink-haired wife, and who still thinks she's sort of protesting the Vietnam War. She's like a 70-year-old teenager with the hair and the nose piercing and everything. And she, on those two, they were talking about fairness of outcome, and we were talking about the law and evidence and facts and things like that. And they both were on the same page. They just sort of shrugged on this, but it's relevant if it's overwhelming facts in one direction. Sure, you take notice, but most legal cases aren't. It's 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. It's the entirety of the facts don't always line up just in one direction. Sometimes they do, but they, I remember he was, I think he was about to retire. I think he'd already announced it actually at that point. But he was of the view that restorative justice was really the primary issue. He was he was hearing cases and he wanted to create a fair outcome. But what does fair mean? Because that's very difficult to define. If you're looking at facts and evidence, that's clear. You can start defining that. But when you look at fair, does he want to equalise the outcome? So he wanted, if the one party was sort of wealthy and so on, but they were pretty much in the right and had the case sewn up, he didn't want them to walk away with a great victory. He wanted this, I'll rule, I'll make a neutral ruling so that nobody really wins, but you have to pay their legal fees. And of course, that type of thing. And so his view was that fairness of outcome was the issue. But on my asking, well, what's fair? How do you define that? It's a shoulder shrug. Whatever I say it is, I'm the fucking judge and that sort of. Now, these people aren't just one here, one there. They're everywhere now. And again, when you get people like the sort of folks are getting, Fani Willis and Georgia in the United States. I mean, goodness me. She'd struggle to hold down a job in a grocery clerk in an outer suburban grocery store. And you got her as a district attorney. That's insane. How does a low IQ activist like that get that job? And she's elected, as far as I know. Look at that woman, Letitia James in New York, who campaigned. I don't think anyone was standing against her, and she was well funded and so on. So, in a black neighbourhood, that probably guarantees her the gig. But she campaigned on I'm going to get Trump. That was the thing. Would anyone in their right mind elect somebody like that? So there's a lot of crazy. And when you look at Chesa Boudin or Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, you look around the United States. Most of them, if not all of them, George Soros funded. How is that allowed, for goodness sake? But this is only just the more visual aspect. Every legal school, pretty much every legal school in the United States, every law school, is churning out students that are being the law is really a device and a vehicle to create social equality or social equity rather, and to equalise outcomes and so on. So there's going to be very few people left in law who are not suitably, brainwashed into that way of thinking. But at the core of this is that they believe, and again, look at their online postings. That the lawyers and the DAs, they believe that the current system is completely illegitimate. Therefore, they are obligated and duty bound. They are required to subvert it and undermine it, and to create the optics of equity. Now, well, that means putting career criminals back on the street. Now, there are things they could do that I think could be done, such as forced, say, trade and education schools, while at detention. And that could be done so that when these people get out, at least they've got to get out of prison. At least they've got some recognised qualifications. Would this work in every case? Well, of course not. Would it work in many cases? And it's most likely to reduce the requirements to act as to work as base level labourers, just lugging the bricks around and breaking up the rocks, digging the holes. Anyone can do that. And so to do those sorts of things to at least try and keep them off the streets. Now, when you look at some of the George Floyd as an example, Mr. Floyd was a career criminal, and yet it was treated as if he was some sort of a saint. And so we also need to understand the wider look at righteous activism to try and portray any career criminal, assuming they're non-white, any career criminal as somehow a folk hero of the oppressed, and this obsession with, well, the guy didn't have any social power, therefore he cannot be held accountable. If he can't be held accountable, then he can't be guilty. And this is the mentality indirectly that, say, goes through into rape laws, that well, if she had 2 drinks, then she consented to intimate relations. But if she had 2.5 drinks, she couldn't consent, and therefore she's not accountable, and therefore, and so on. So this is a process of escalation, the same sort of escalation that you could apply in any direction. Hitler drank water when he was thirsty, and I saw Joe Biden drinking water. Joe Biden drinks water. Hitler drinks water. Therefore, Joe Biden is Hitler. Hey, are you saying they didn't drink water? Is that what you're saying? So you could use that sort of silliness and absurdity and ridiculously to relate one event to or one set of behaviours or attitudes or views to another, and therefore to correlate. Well, one's Hitler, therefore the other must be Hitler. And this sort of thing is widespread and used very loosely. Now, I've seen this firsthand in, say, the divorce courts, where the judiciary in the divorce courts are so ideological that they can go through any line item, not just overall, but any line item of evidence, and simply reverse the burden of proof. So if she says he's an abuser, then it's fact, and he must disprove it. If he says she's an abuser, then he has to prove it, and so on. So the judiciary can just allocate burden of proof. They can reverse the burden of proof, double the burden of, triple the burden of proof, as it suits them over each line item of evidence. And again, this is creeping more widely into criminal courts and other courts. And it's, of course, subverting and undermining the entire justice system. And but this idea that there's so many of these legal practitioners now believe they have the obligation to, or that the law is completely illegitimate and all its methodologies and procedures are illegitimate, and therefore they have an obligation, even though they're taking an oath of office to uphold and protect those very laws. From the minute they get in the door, they're trying to subvert them. You've been a task today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.